If you like our video, please give a thumbs up and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to be notified of new videos. Flying saucers didn't seem to be a topic of interest in Oradell, NJ, at the end of the summer of 1962. The Record, a daily newspaper based in Hackensack and serving Bergen County, had published only 2 flying saucers articles that year, one about the recently formed New Jersey Association of Aerial Phenomena, NJAAP, and another on the 15th anniversary of Kenneth Arnold's famous sighting, but the testimonies of 3 Oradell teens in mid-September would cause a local sensation. Their UFO report mobilized police and USAF resources, brought together a crowd of 100 one evening to wait for an apparition, and seemingly generated a spate of saucer reports in the area. All of this before some anonymous Bergen teens issued a belated anonymous confession, alleging that everything stemmed from a hoax. Space had been in the news that week, but it was centered around NASA, particularly on a local boy headed for orbit. Wally Schirra, who was scheduled to lift off on September 28, had been born in Hackensack and grown up in Oradell. On September 13, the Mercury astronaut was the subject of a CBS special hosted by Walter Cronkite, Our Next Man in Space, the sighting that launched the flap shortly before 8 p.m. on Saturday 15, 1962. David Finley and Steve Nagy, both age 13 of Oradell, and Robert Decker, 15, of Emerson saw a UFO. The 3 were on the Oradell Avenue, the bridge overlooking the reservoir, when they saw a bright object about 3/4 of a mile away over the water. The UFO hovered close to the dam, splash landed into the water, and then swiftly flew away without a sound. The 3 boys ran to the nearby police station to breathlessly report what they'd seen. Project Blue Book files show the Oradell police took a report, sent officers to investigate, and had the boys make sketches of the object. The Record said, the boys described the object as an oval with a band around the middle and spots on the upper half. A fin was drawn protruding from the lower half. UFO sketches by the original 3 witnesses, David Finley, Steve Nagy, and Robert Decker. Key locations in the saga of the Oradell sighting. The Record, September 17, 1962. The next night, Sunday 16, David Finley went back with 2 other friends and the trio also saw a UFO. We didn't believe Finley till we saw it, one boy said. Drawings from the new witnesses were also collected by the police. UFO sketches by Paul Bittetti and Ed Lomby. The Record reported on Tuesday 18 that 2 more witnesses emerged to the first sighting, the Saturday UFO, Splash, both 16-year-olds from the nearby borough of Emerson, William Cooper, and Alfred Taus. The paper said Cooper described the UFO as a light, many times brighter than a star, that moved quickly back and forth over the pines. The Record, Tuesday, 18, 1962. The second article was pivotal in turning the story into a UFO flap, by treating the Emerson boys' story as corroboration of the first. The Record stated the boys' report raised the number of witnesses to 8 who saw something land in the reservoir. No, only the 3 original witnesses reported seeing a possible landing. The adult man mentioned in the first article said he saw nothing, that he only heard a large splash. The various testimonies of 7 boys were lumped together as if it was objectively one single incident. The 2 new witnesses were more than 6,000 feet away from the Oradell Avenue bridge when they saw a bright light and heard a noise. Only 1 teen was heard from, and his mother, not the second witness. The story was reported as if verified fact, nothing was questioned. The newspaper accounts also omit the detail that police questioned 2 other boys present at the time of the sighting. They were fishing from the south side of the bridge, but these boys reported seeing no flying object. The media attention fueled the saucer fever, but it was also spread by word of mouth. The original witnesses probably all attended Riverdale High School. Between the newspaper coverage and the kids spreading the word at school, there was a crowd gathered Tuesday night to see a saucer. In a similar scene from Close Encounters of the Third Kind Tuesday evening, about 100 people, mostly teenagers, gathered on the Oradell Avenue bridge. The Record, WED, September 19 reported the crowd saw nothing, but there were several accounts of other sightings in the area, including that of 2 sets of police officers who had seen something in the early morning that one said might have been a searchlight. The story stated that the local police chiefs were skeptical and that Oradell Chief George Brugnoli guessed that the boys Saturday and Sunday saw a bird on his way south for the winter. He said birds with 4-foot wingspans stop off at the reservoir every year on their way south. The Record, September 19, 1962. The Record on September 20 reported the varied UFO sightings as if they were a single object lurking in the locale, 20 persons waited in vain for the flying saucer reportedly seen in the area every night since Saturday. However, they reported that sightings have been reported now by about a dozen persons, including police in Westwood and Oradell. Meanwhile, saucer fever had spread to the nearby borough of Hawthorne. Paterson Evening News reported the Hawthorne reports as if they were a continuation of the UFO, sighted early this week throughout the state. The Oradell and stories from Hawthorne and other parts got conflated as a Jersey flap, but they were really several distinctly different events. Paterson Evening News, September 21, 1962. At least one local businesses tried to cash in on the flap. The Lucky Strike Lanes invited Spaceman to come bowl with them. The Record, September 24, 1962. The confession of the Bergenfield pranksters. On the 25th, some cold water was thrown on the UFO business. The Bergenfield pranksters sent a letter to Oradell police, claiming, "Our flying saucer was made of a balsa wood frame filled with helium balloons for natural buoyancy. Power was supplied by a radio controlled by a 1/8 horsepower model airplane with a variable pitch propeller." Apparently a small group of teenage boys, the group seemed to claim, causing only the Saturday and Sunday incidents, saying, "Please do not think the boys that reported this were involved, because, to them, it was a flying saucer." If a hoax, that left a lot of other reports at different times and locations unexplained. However, there were a lot of inexperienced observers out, and the local press was portraying every report of stray shape or light in the sky as a UFO sighting. The Record, September 25, 1962. The newspapers had already caused a lot of confusion by lumping reporting every sighting as connected and of equal value. At least one Hawthorne sighting had been conclusively explained as the rocket stage of the TROS-6 satellite launch from Cape Canaveral on September 18. Some of the early morning sightings sound very much like planets seen before dawn, and some of the other accounts were likely from excitable teens mistaking airplane lights for a saucer. The Bergenfield pranksters' letter might explain the original weekend incidents, but not all that followed over in several surrounding towns. Philip J. Del Vecchio's article in Paterson Evening News, September 28, 1962, rejected the confession as explaining the sightings in Hawthorne. The two boroughs are about 11 miles away from one another, and he stated the speed, brilliance, or performance of the UFOs could not have been produced by amateurs. Paterson Evening News, September 28, 1962. The Project Blue Book non-investigation. Project Blue Book had separate files for Oradell and Hawthorne incidents. Their conclusion of the original sighting is based on the limited data available, misidentification of a bird. It appears their information was limited to data from the Oradell police investigation. The file stated, no attempt at analysis of many other reported sightings. The Hawthorne file merely contains 2 News Saucer magazine clippings and a letter from a citizen asking about the UFO reports. The Air Force replied, the Hawthorne sightings have never been officially reported. Therefore, we are not able to effect an evaluation. Project Blue Book, Oradell, NJ, September 15, 24, 1962, 23 pages. Project Blue Book, Hawthorne, NJ, September 13, 24, 1962, 4 pages. Project Blue Book, Newark, New Jersey, September 21, 1962, 13 pages. The Saucer Organization and magazine coverage. Saucer clubs and magazines were happy to have a slug of new stories to discuss. Most merely summarized the newspaper coverage, but a few added some rumors and sensational details. The NJAAP Bulletin, Sept. October 1962, UFO lands in Reservoir Climax to NJ, Flap, reported that the parents of the witnesses were called up by local police and told that their sons should refrain from speaking about the matter since the government requested a secrecy policy. Another tidbit about the September 19 saucer watch at the bridge: the heavy rain dampened the spirits of many, yet 20 people still turned out. Nothing was seen save the rumor that Oradell police shot at a 14-foot man with shotguns. John Nove was following the story and provided most of the information used in presenting the NJAAP report. NICAP's UFO investigator, October-November 1962, disc landing reported in New Jersey, included some details from and about the Hawthorne sighting of September 21. Officer George Jedany, in a report to NICAP, said the UFO, which he sketched as a disc, seemed to revolve. They dismissed any suggestion that the cases were explained as a hoax, rejecting the confession letter from the Bergenfield pranksters. Saucer News, December 1962, Saucer, flap, in northern New Jersey, a summary provided by Edward J. Babcock, Jr., of the NJAAP. It concluded by saying of the confession, "It seems impossible that this explanation could account for all the sightings described above." Clipped in Project Blue Book files. Sources: Space and Science, December 1962, The Oradell, New Jersey Incident of September 1962, a story drawn from the report by the NJAAP Bulletin. The NJAAP Bulletin, February 1963, New Jersey UFO flap, covered and updated the story to cover events not included in their original report. APRO Bulletin, May 1963, Saucer Dunks in Reservoir, was late to the party, but provided a good summary. They rejected the confession letter, and said, "There is more to this than meets the eye, especially when we consider the other sightings of objects in the vicinity of water deposits during 1962. The 1964 NICAP book edited by Richard Hall, The UFO Evidence, presented the New Jersey flap and the kitchen sink. The UFO Evidence, 1964 in Fate magazine, April 1967, Timothy Green Beckley wrote in discussing the 1966 Wannock flap saying, "New Jersey seems to seethe with UFO activity." The nearby town of Oradell, about 15 miles from Wannock, saw a gigantic flap in September 1962. At that time more than 25 witnesses saw a craft dive into the Oradell Reservoir and emerge sometime later. He concludes by saying, that perhaps, conjecture that the UFOs may be draining water from the reservoir is not so bold after all. The rest is history. The press, for the most part, was satisfied with the confession letter from the Bergenfield pranksters, so the New Jersey flap seemed to end as it had begun, with some boys telling a story about UFOs. The record, September 29, 1962. For whatever reason, the saucer fever and sightings in Oradell died down before Wally Schirra's space launch on October 3. The Oradell Bridge in 2019. The local media rode the saucer story. The police were annoyed by it. The Air Force dismissed it. The saucer fiends seized on it, and the incidents went down in UFO history as a major local flap.